Hello and welcome to another episode of Friar Territory. I'm your host, Kyle Glaser. We have a very special crossover episode for you today with Robbie Hyde, the host of Monster Territory, another show here on the Foul Territory Network, talking all things Boston Red Sox. Robbie is kind enough to join us today to break down the signing of Nick Pivetta, which was made official today. Robbie, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. This is great to do these crossovers in the Foul Territory Network. I love it.
Absolutely, certainly is. And as we mentioned, it's very, very relevant. The Padres are signing a lot of ex-Red Sox players. Nick Pivetta, the signing became official today. Kyle Hart last week. But obviously, the main signing is Nick Pivetta. Padres signed him for 4 years, $55 million. There are opt-outs after the 2026 and 2027 seasons. It's a heavily backloaded deal. And because Nick Pivetta declined a qualifying offer from the Red Sox, the Padres also had to forfeit their second-round pick and $500,000 out of their international bonus pool. It's a very heavy price to pay for a pitcher when you look on the surface, has been a below-average starter over the course of his career, and even over the last 4 seasons, which has been his peak, has been more of a league average starter. You don't typically see below-average to average starters getting potentially 4 years, $55 million, and sacrificing a second-round pick and giving up $500,000 of international bonus pool money. What has been your assessment of Nick Pivetta, being up close, watching him for the last few years in Boston?
Yeah, Nick Pivetta, he's a very interesting case. He's either very hot or very cold. I've gone through the highs and the lows of Pivetta as a starter, as a reliever, going on great runs as a starter or a reliever, whatever it may be. The 2021 postseason, he pitched fantastic in that postseason. That's where people really started to love Pivetta. A guy really, even despite all the struggles, a gamer, a competitor at the end of the day, a guy that wears his heart on his sleeve, right? He puts it all out there on the field. But like you said, pretty much when you take a look at the numbers, they come out to league average in the end. In his Red Sox career, ERA in the fifth, right around that 4 range. But man, this was a guy where he would go on a run where 8 starts in a row. This guy had like an ERA under a 1. The guy was absolutely nuts. If you go a little deeper into his numbers, when you take a look at Stuff Plus, he actually ranks pretty well when it comes to that. I actually have the number exactly here, 29th out of 105 pitchers with at least 200 innings pitched over the last 2 seasons in Stuff Plus. So he's got a 4-seamer that has some good life to it. He has a pretty nice curveball to go along with it as well. He'll mix in a sweeper, a cutter. He's a guy that, sure, he'll get cold, but you can count on him for the most part, at least for the middle of the rotation. I think he will be a good get for the Padres. They needed a little bit more stability in that rotation with Musgrove out. One more thing with Pivetta, I just touched on it a second ago, where he got moved to the bullpen at one point. And this is where the heart on his sleeve thing kind of came into play, where if you go back to 2023, I believe it was Sean McAdam. He went on MLB Network, and I think that's what it was. I'm going blank on it. I'm sorry. But he said, hey, the Red Sox, they got a lot of starting pitching. That was the year they had Corey Kluber as their opening day starter. But they had a lot of options there, and he suggested, Pivetta could possibly be an option for the bullpen. Pivetta, he went up to him in the clubhouse, say, hey, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, he might be an option for the bullpen. And lo and behold, he ended up getting moved to the bullpen. But he did not like it at first, but he came around to it, and he really dominated in that role. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do with the Padres, but at least if worst came to worst and that move ended up happening, he's a guy that you can count on, I would say, for the most part. So I rambled a lot there, but pretty much at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a good signing for San Diego.
Yeah, you mentioned the 2023 season really struggled to start the year in the rotation, moved to the bullpen for the bulk of the year, performed well there, finished the year back in the starting rotation. It was only 2 seasons ago, so there is a little bit of that risk factor for the Padres. It's not like that's ancient history. From the Padres' perspective, what this signing is, the Padres are really making a bold bet that by moving Nick Pivetta out of the American League East and the hitter-friendly ballparks there into the National League West and the pitcher-friendly ballparks there, and putting him in front of a much better defense, we'll start to see the results match some of those peripherals. As you mentioned, stuff is there, strikeout percentage, walk percentage. It's all good. But at the end of the day, the name of the game is run prevention. And that's something that Nick Pivetta mentioned has been more league average at. But that is what the Padres are betting on, that by getting him out of Fenway and Yankee Stadium and Baltimore and putting him in Petco Park, Dodger Stadium, Oracle Park, and putting him in front of a better defense. I don't need to tell you, the Red Sox defense has been absolutely atrocious to watch for years as pitchers for many years in a row. That's the bet they're making, and I think it's a reasonable bet. It's just a high stakes bet given the amount of money they committed to him potentially, depending on the opt-outs, plus forfeiting the second round pick, plus the international bonus pool money. How realistic do you think that bet is to come to fruition? I mean, again, you've seen the Red Sox defense in action for years, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, no, I think you made a couple of good points there with the ballpark factor there, as well as the defense. Yeah, the Red Sox have had terrible defense. That's why his FIP has looked pretty decent, right, compared to his ERA at times. But I think at Petco Park, where they're bottom 5 in park factor when it comes to right-handed hitters, where Fenway Park, I believe they were second or third, can't remember exactly. But, I think he's going to fare better there. I think that'll be a better environment for him. Of course, he is going to have to go up against guys like Shohei Ohtani in that division. That's never going to help. But I think for the most part, he will see more success. I think that will be a better fit for him. And again, the defense, the Red Sox, they've had that's been a talking point today with the Red Sox, with Rafael Devers. So it just never ends. But the Padres, they've had good defense now over the last couple of years. I think it's going to be a good fit. Like you said, too, the home run ball. I mean, that's been something where I was kind of wondering, where is he going to go this offseason? I remember thinking San Diego, could be an option. But then the money factor, they've had, the issues with the payroll over the last couple of years, the ownership thing. I'm thinking, it could be a pretty good fit there, but are they going to pay him? And I'm glad they did, So we'll see. But like I said, I think it will end up being a pretty good fit.
Yeah, you mentioned the home run ball, and it's one of those interesting things where, again, he has really good stuff. The strikeout rate's good. The walk rate is good. But at the same time, he does give up a lot of hard contact. When guys do put the bat to the ball on him, they tend to barrel it up. It's a lot of hard contact, and it's a lot of hard contact in the air. This is not a ground ball pitcher. So we've seen the home runs ball really hurt him, and that is where Petco Park, the marine layer, will help. And again, Dodger Stadium, the Dodgers obviously have an electric offense, but the ball doesn't actually fly there at night. A little bit more in the summer, but a lot of times it doesn't. San Francisco as well is a graveyard. Arizona and Colorado especially obviously play a little more hitter friendly, but I do think on the whole he'll be pitching in places where, again, his weakness, if you will, hard contact in the air, won't hurt him as much as it would, as you said, Fenway Park, Yankee Stadium, which is a bandbox. We've seen the ball fly out and over the years in Toronto and Baltimore. So I do think it's a good fit there. You seem pretty confident that all these factors we were talking about, the signing will work out even at the high price the Padres paid.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, sit here and say he's gonna be a Cy Young by any means, but I think for the most part, he's a guy that's another thing I forgot to add too. He's a durable guy. He's a guy that he's gonna give you innings. He's gonna make you start every fifth day. Had I believe it was a bit of a forearm issue last year, but ended up not being anything too crazy. A guy that's been healthy for the most part. Going back to when they brought him in 2020. I just think, again, he won't be a Cy Young candidate by any means, but I think he, for the most part, when you consider the payroll question marks the Padres have been having, I think he was probably one of the better guys you could get to replace Joe Musgrove for this year. I think and I feel like they actually got him on a pretty decent contract. I remember when he opted out of the contract, people were saying, oh man, this is a guy where, because of this market, the way it could develop, who knows? Maybe it could be, a $20 million a year pitcher. And I feel like they got him at AAV wise, they got him on a pretty decent rate. So,
yeah, no question. The deal's heavily backloaded as well, as you mentioned. The Padres, their payroll issues, the ownership situation has been well documented. It's only a $1 million salary with $3 million signing bonus this year. The rest of the money is spread out over the final 3 years, and he has opt-outs. So if he does pitch really, really well, theoretically, the Padres could essentially get him for 2 years and I believe $23 or $24 million, which would work out really well. And I think you raised an important point too. The Padres don't need him to be an ace. They just need him to be a solid number 4 starter behind Yu Darvish, behind Dylan Cease, behind Michael King. You mentioned his durability. He's averaged over 150 innings a year over the last 4 years. So even if it's 150, 160 innings of, again, even just a 4 ERA or a high 3s ERA, that's all the Padres need from him. And I do think that's important here. It's not like they're bringing him in saying, oh, this is going to be our number 2 starter. Oh, this is the guy that we need to, really, really take a leap if we want to contend. They just need him to essentially be what he's been, which has been a league average starter. And if he's better than that, all the more, benefit to the Padres.
Yeah, and getting back to how we were talking about where, probably be a good fit at Petco, I am curious to see how he's going to do, going to Coors Field a couple of times. Let's see how he does against the righties over there at Chase Field. Obviously the Dodgers lineup is stacked. I'm going to be interested to see how he does on the road. That's going to be, I think, something to pay attention to. But Petco, I think he'll end up having good home splits. Let's see for the road, though. I wonder if he ends up being one of those guys. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, certainly. I mentioned the ball doesn't really fly at Dodger Stadium, but when you have the guys in that lineup that they do, they can certainly take you yard anytime. And I'll be really curious to see again. Anytime you move leagues, move across the country, you're facing new competition. Sometimes that lack of familiarity can play in the pitcher's favor early, but as the year goes on, the hitters adjust. So I'll be really curious to see, how that progresses. Robbie, I want to talk to you about 2 other former Red Sox. Xander Bogaerts moving back to shortstop and the addition of Kyle Hart. We're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, and then we'll jump right into it.
Hey, real nutrition has the power to make a real difference in people's lives. So let me talk about Orgain for a moment, please. The new 30-gram complete protein shakes really get you set up for pre or post-workout crats, and also it tastes so damn good.
Tastes too good. It tastes too good. I want to have a second one because there's tons of protein shakes out there that taste terrible. This makes me feel like I'm getting a reward for my workout.
Satisfy those cravings without any added sugar. All 9 essential amino acids, part of your ultra filtered protein shake. It's called Orgain. There are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/FOUL30. Use code FOUL30 for 30% off your order. That's the best offer that you're going to find. It's from the FT fam. You got to use the code FOUL30 for 30% off. Give us a little shake on the way out, Kratz, so they know. Just a quick shake. Nice.
All right, back here on Friar Territory, I'm Kyle Glaser alongside Robbie Hyde, here breaking down the Nick Pivetta edition, as well as a host of former Red Sox that now call San Diego home. Robbie, before the break, we talked about Nick Pivetta, and playing in front of a much improved defense was really going to help him. Again, we saw Rafael Devers today saying he doesn't want to play he wants to play third base. He doesn't want to move off for Alex Bregman. It's no secret Devers has just frankly been a terrible third baseman for most of his career. And there have been a host of defensive issues for the Red Sox, but that's a big one. The Padres have been a strong defensive team in years past, but a big part of that was they had Ha-Seong Kim at shortstop. Yeah. He left, signed with the Tampa Bay Rays. Xander Bogaerts has now moved back to shortstop after they had to move him off the position because he was playing it so poorly. Yeah. I do think the Padres defense this year is going to be interesting to watch because it's not as strong as it was in years past. Again, you have Manny Machado at third, who's still great. Jake Cronenworth's a good second baseman, but shortstop, which is obviously a very important position, has been a downgrade. We in San Diego have seen Xander Bogaerts decline defensively, especially. Obviously, his departure was not very looked upon favorably by Red Sox fans. At the same time, right now, the contract that the Padres signed him to does look a bit onerous. Do you feel like Nick Pivetta can be successful even with maybe some deficiencies in the infield? Again, not to the level the Red Sox were at, but this isn't going to be the same quality of Padres defense as we've seen in years past. A big part of that is Xander Bogaerts now at shortstop.
Yeah, with Bogaerts, that was the thing where, in Boston, he was a fine shortstop. He got the job done, a guy that can make a pretty solid play here and there. He was good on the everyday or the routine plays. He was a guy that, you could just count on, but he was a guy that you never really counted on to really give you those defensive runs saved, right? To, go that little extra mile. Not saying he didn't want to. I'm just saying it was just the ability. But, I think for the most part, he just gets back to what he was doing there. Just obviously be very consistent when it comes to the routine play. I think it'll be all right. And that's another thing too. They have that familiarity with each other there. So, I think that'll come into play a little bit. But, I think Bogarts will be fine. Obviously, Machado is still going to be fine at third base. I'm interested to see, I don't know, Luis Arraez, is he still going to be with the Padres over the next couple of months? What happens over there? Cronenworth. I think for the most part, it can't get any worse because the Red Sox infield has been so atrocious. It has to get a little bit better, I would think. So.
No question. And again, it goes back to as well, Nick Pivetta is more of a fly ball pitcher. In the Padres outfield, you feel pretty good. Fernando Tatis Jr. is one of the best defensive outfielders in right field. Jackson Merrill really took to center field. And look, left field is not a strength of the Padres offensively, but Jason Hayward, even in his advanced age, is still a good defender. So they have some options out there. And I think that is something where, again, Nick Pivetta won't be moving from a terrible defense to an elite defense anymore, but he'll be moving from a terrible defense to one that should still be pretty good. And again, if he's just league average, the Padres will be fine. One other pitcher that was a member of the Red Sox organization for a long time, the Padres signed, is Kyle Hart. Lefty, went over to Korea. He famously really struggled with the Red Sox in 2020, went through some health issues, went over to Korea, and really found himself. And we see different players figure it out at different times, many times in different countries. There's a long history of pitchers going over to Korea, improving, coming back. Merrill Kelly is a great example of that. Chris Flexen's a great example of that. Eric Fetty's a great example of that. Obviously, Kyle Hart hasn't pitched in the majors for the Red Sox since 2020, but he was in their system for a while. What do you make of just his comeback and his story? And from your experience, what are the Padres getting here?
Yeah, this was a guy where, going back over, go back to 2020, funny thing, I was looking at the top prospects back from 2020, guys like Darwinson and Hernandez, were in the top 5 of the, the Red Sox prospects overall. So, yeah, there wasn't really too much to work with. Kyle Hart was a guy, he was kind of just hanging around in the minor league system. He was getting rocked. He just wasn't able to figure it out. Like, he came up, I think it was 2020. That's just such a forgotten season at this point. And I think the guy had an ERA like it was high. It was about double digits.
It was really bad.
Yeah, but it's cool seeing these guys going over to the KBO and figuring something out. I've heard a lot of these guys. They talk about their experiences going over to Korea, to Japan, and they do things a little differently there. And I love seeing that. Like Eric Fetty last year. This guy became a hot commodity at the trade deadline, for crying out loud. Who would have thought that? Excited to see what he can do. Who knows? Maybe this could be an alternative for some of these guys to go over there, work out some kinks, and come back and get better. So.
Yeah, no, and that was something I wrote extensively about during my time at Baseball America, the benefits of players going over to Korea and Japan and some of the improvements they make. And one of the things that, they talked about in Korea specifically, both players and scouts, was a lot of times these guys, they teach them how to pitch backwards. They teach them, some new pitches. They just overall improve the pitchability. And a lot of times it's just a matter of getting the innings, being able to work through things. And again, NPB and KBO are very, very high pressure environments in the sense that, rabid fan bases. I don't want to make it seem like it's pitching in Double-A because it's not, but it's also not quite the same stakes as pitching in the major leagues in a postseason race. And so for a lot of these guys, just again, in a little bit of a lower pressure environment, they're able to go over and figure some things out. And just everything about him, his story, what he's been through, it seems like an easy guy to root for.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see what he can do there. And like we've talked about, he's in a pretty good ballpark. So let's see if that can help him out too.
Yeah, exactly. The Padres, again, for most of the offseason, starting pitching depth was a huge, huge, huge question. How are they going to be able to add, especially given their payroll limitations? And really in the span of 4 or 5 days, all of a sudden they've I wouldn't say they've answered it entirely, but they've certainly improved it. You add Nick Pivetta, you add Kyle Hart. All of a sudden, that 5th rotation spot has some competition. Randy Vasquez, former Yankee, Matt Waldron. It's going to be interesting to see. I am curious, from the outside looking in, you're on the opposite coast, other league. Again, just kind of look at the Padres from afar. What would you say the perception of the Padres is right now from that, far away opposing viewpoint?
I would say, at least for me, there feels like, I don't want to say they took a big step back, but it feels like they took a bit of a step back this offseason. In the end, you got to go play the games. You never know how the season can turn out. When you take a look at the fact that, you lose a guy like Ha-Seong Kim, who I think was still is one of the most underrated players in the game. He does so many things for your team that, people don't really look at, like the base running, just what he does defensively, the fact that he can move around and play some other positions. Good guy for the clubhouse, just a solid glue player, a high WAR player, Ha-Seong Kim, but he doesn't do it with the bat. He does it with all the little things. I was pretty sad they lost him. I was thinking he was going to go back there at least on like a pillow contract or something after the shoulder surgery, but it is what it is. And then obviously losing Jerickson Profar. I mean, they got a great year out of him this past year. Let's see what he does in Atlanta. But, man, losing that production and then only bringing in, guys like Jason Hayward, Connor Joe, this feels a little underwhelming. I would have liked to see them, but again, obviously they're having some issues with the ownership this year, the front office. I brought up the payroll here. I'm very interested to see, and I would love to hear your take on, this whole Dylan Cease thing. Michael King popping up in the trade rumors. The Red Sox have popped up with Dylan Cease. I guess they supposedly made a phone call. What's your take on, Dylan Cease right now?
Well, look, you have to understand with AJ Preller, he's always going to talk big trades with every team in baseball. No player is untouchable. The Padres just by default, their front office led by AJ Preller, they're very aggressive. They will talk about anything and everything, the wildest, biggest trades you can think of. So that's just their MO. They are always going to talk any player. And because of that, you always hear stories come out about, oh, so-and-so checked in on so-and-so. Oh, the Padres are thinking about this guy. When in reality, it's just the way they operate. They always talk about everyone. From the outset, Dylan Cease and Michael King were only going to be traded for very, very large packages. It wasn't going to be a situation where the Padres traded them for your traditional, there's only a year left on his contract, let's get something back for him before we lose him in free agency. They were only going to make the move if they got back something that made you say, wow, this fills multiple holes on our roster and saves us a ton of money. As I mentioned on a few other teams, radio shows and podcasts, you weren't going to get Dylan Cease without trading someone who your reaction would be like, no, we're not trading him. Like it was going to have to be a very, very lofty package. And for the Padres, when you look at it and you say, okay, we can go into the season with Yu Darvish, Dylan Cease, Michael King, now Nick Pivetta, that's a pretty good top four where you feel like you can at least contend for a wild card spot in the National League. And they were never going to make a trade that took away their ability to compete this year. It was only going to be something that filled in other holes, but still kept them competitive. And look, other teams understandably are reluctant to part with packages that large for a player with only 1 year remaining until free agency. So I think for me, it was always going to be a little bit of a long shot. It would have to be a jaw-dropping package, and I'm not surprised it didn't happen. And now the Padres go into the season with a rotation that once again looks like it's a strength. And given the players they have, the contracts they have, it does make sense to me to give this another go, even if they have taken a step back. There's no question. I think you look at this team right now, it's more of an 86-win team compared to a 93-win team a year ago. But it's still a team that should compete for at least one wild card spot in the National League.
Yeah, I agree. They'll be in the mix. There'll be a team that's interesting at the deadline if they still have Cease at the time along with Michael King. I actually hope they can figure out an extension with Michael King. He's not going to be as expensive as Dylan Cease. I would love for them to keep him around. He was so good last year for them. But there'll definitely be a team that's interesting, kind of like almost like the Blue Jays in a way, where they have all this talent, but like where are they going to be in the standings? If they're 3 out, 4 out, is that going to be something where the front office says, are we capable of going on a deep run in the postseason? I hope the Padres stay where they're at. I hope they can really figure something out here. Man, it's crazy to think, that Dodgers-Padres World Series, I just said World Series because it felt like the World Series. Because really out of all the teams that were in the postseason, that felt like the World Series to me. They took them to the very last bit there, and unfortunately they came up short. I would love for the Padres to figure it out and get over that hump. It's unfortunate that the Dodgers, they just had one of the most ridiculous off seasons of all time. So, hopefully, San Diego, they've been doing some good things here. I hope they can keep it going despite the struggles of this off season. I still think they'll be pretty solid though.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we'll see how the year plays out. Like every team, it's going to come down to health. It's going to come down to, who's stepping up and maybe delivering better than expected performance versus who's delivering underperformance. So many, things have to go right for every team. And that's why they play the games. And we'll see how it shakes out. Robbie, thank you so much for joining me today, providing your insight on Nick Pivetta and more. We wish you and the Red Sox all the best as they figure out how to handle this Rafael Devers mess and convince him to move off of third base where he has been a liability for years and years and years and years.
Yep, we're about to break it down over on Monster Territory in about 30 minutes. That's going to be fun to dive into. It was so happy for the last week. Bregman, you had the Savannah Bananas showing up at spring training, playing the trumpets, the trombones. Everything was happy. And then Rafi said one word, no. And then everything just went down the toilet at that point. So, that's the Red Sox for you. There's always a story. But that's another thing I will say about Pivetta. I do think that environment is going to be better for him. The Red Sox media, it's tough. They're on you over there. They expect the very best out of you. And I think San Diego will be better for him. And I'm excited to see what he does.
Absolutely. We'll certainly see how it all shakes out. Robbie, thank you so much again for joining us. Once again, this has been another episode of Friar Territory. Go ahead and give us a review on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Give us a like. Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. For Robbie Hyde, I'm Kyle Glaser. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.
See you later.